You're Julius Caesar. You've got 60,000 Roman soldiers. Sounds like a lot, right? Except you're facing 80,000 Gallic warriors trapped inside a fortress on a hill. And behind you, another 250,000 Gallic warriors marching to crush you. You're completely surrounded, outnumbered 4-1. Any sane general would retreat, cut their losses, live to fight another day. But Caesar? He orders his men to build walls. Not just around the enemy fortress. That would be normal siege tactics. No, he builds a second set of walls facing the other direction, toward the relief army. He's literally trapping himself and his entire army between two massive enemy forces. His own soldiers think he's lost his mind. They're building their own tomb. This decision would either make Caesar the greatest general in Roman history or get every single one of his men killed. There'd be no middle ground, no retreat, no escape. But to understand how Caesar ended up in this impossible situation, we need to go back 1 year earlier, to a young Gallic chieftain who did something no one had done in centuries. He united all of Gaul against Rome. His name was Vercingetorix. Here's what you need to understand about Gaul in 52 BC. It wasn't a country. It was a patchwork of rival tribes who spent more time fighting each other than anyone else. The Arverni hated the Aedui. The Belgae didn't trust the Aquitani. Everyone had ancient feuds and old grudges. And that's exactly why Caesar had been able to conquer most of it over the previous 6 years. Divide and conquer. Pick off tribes one by one, make alliances with some to crush others. Classic Roman playbook. Then Vercingetorix showed up and changed everything. He was young, only about 30 years old, charismatic, and he had a vision. Stop fighting each other and unite against Rome. Sounds obvious, right? But it had never worked before. Tribal pride always got in the way. Somehow Vercingetorix pulled it off. One by one, tribes joined his coalition. The Arverni, the Senones, the Carnutes. Even tribes that had been fighting each other for generations put aside their differences. And Vercingetorix wasn't just charismatic, he was smart. He knew the Gauls couldn't beat Roman legions in traditional pitched battles. Roman discipline, Roman tactics, Roman engineering, they were too good. So he changed tactics entirely. Scorched earth. Guerrilla warfare. Burn the crops so Romans can't resupply. Destroy your own villages so the Romans find nothing to plunder. Attack supply lines. Ambush foraging parties. Avoid major battles. Just bleed them slowly. And it was working. Caesar's army was struggling. They were hungry, demoralized, taking losses. For the first time in his Gallic campaigns, Caesar was actually losing. And back in Rome, his political enemies were circling. Failure here didn't just mean military defeat. It meant his political career was over, possibly his life. Then Vercingetorix made a decision. After months of successful guerrilla tactics, he decided to take his 80,000 warriors to a fortress called Alesia and wait for reinforcements. It was defensible, provisioned, and strategically located. A massive relief army was being assembled, every tribe in Gaul contributing warriors. From Alesia, they'd coordinate with the relief army and crush Caesar between them. It seemed like a solid plan. It was also the mistake Caesar had been waiting for. Because Vercingetorix had just put his entire army in one place. And Caesar was about to do something absolutely insane. Let's talk about Alesia. This wasn't just any fortress. It sat on top of Mont Ossois, a plateau about 1,500 feet high with steep slopes on all sides. Rivers protected two flanks. The Gauls had built strong walls and had 80,000 warriors inside with plenty of food and water. A direct assault? Suicidal. You'd be marching uphill under a hail of arrows and javelins into prepared defenses. Just waiting them out? That's Siege Warfare 101. Except Vercingetorix's relief army was coming. And when it arrived, Caesar would be the one trapped. So Caesar looked at this impossible situation and made a decision that was either brilliant or completely insane. Possibly both. He ordered his men to build a wall completely surrounding Alesia. 11 miles of fortifications, a circumvallation in military terms. Trenches, wooden palisades, watchtowers every 80 feet. They'd starve Vercingetorix out while protecting themselves from sorties. His legions worked around the clock. They dug trenches 15 feet wide and filled them with water diverted from nearby rivers. They built a second trench, 15 feet deep, lined with sharpened stakes. Then earthwork walls 12 feet high with towers and catapults. Then just as they were finishing the inner wall, Caesar's scouts rode in with devastating news. The Gallic relief army was coming, and it was massive. Ancient sources claim anywhere from 240,000 to 300,000 warriors, probably exaggerated, but even conservatively, we're talking about 250,000 men. This was the moment. The relief army would arrive in days, maybe a week. Caesar's officers expected the order to retreat. They'd inflicted some damage on Vercingetorix, bloodied the Gaul's nose. Now get out before the trap closed. Caesar gave a different order. Build another wall, facing outward. 14 miles of fortifications, a contravallation. Everything they just built on the inside, do it again on the outside. Ditches filled with water, trenches lined with stakes, hidden pits with sharpened spikes covered with brush, ancient landmines, rows of iron barbs sticking out of the ground like caltropes, wooden stakes carved into points and angled toward the enemy, and behind it all, 12-foot walls with towers and catapults. His men worked in shifts, day and night, while Vercingetorix's forces harassed them from inside and the relief army grew closer. They were building 25 miles of fortifications, essentially 2 complete fortress walls, in a matter of weeks. And here's what made it insane. He was trapping himself. Once those walls were complete, there was no retreat, no escape route, no fallback position. His 60,000 Romans would be caught between 80,000 Gauls inside Alesia and 250,000 outside. But that was the genius of it. If Caesar tried to fight these armies in the open, they'd destroy him. But behind these walls, the Gauls would have to attack fortified positions. They'd fight on his terms, on ground he'd prepared, through kill zones designed to shred massed infantry. It was the greatest gamble of Caesar's career. Either his engineering would win the battle before it ever started, or he built an elaborate tomb for his entire army. And then, the relief army arrived. Imagine standing on those Roman walls. You look one direction, 80,000 Gauls inside Alesia, screaming for your blood. You look the other direction, 250,000 warriors, the largest army assembled in Gaul in living memory, preparing to attack. And you're in the middle, with nowhere to run. The first attacks came on both sides simultaneously, testing the defenses, probing for weak points. Gallic warriors charged the Roman walls and hit the first line of traps. They stumbled into the hidden pits, 5 feet deep with sharpened stakes at the bottom. The ones that made it past that hit the iron barbs sticking out of the ground, shredding their feet and legs. Then came the ditches and the stakes. And finally, if they made it that far, the 12-foot walls with Romans raining javelins and arrows down on them. The Romans held, barely. They were fighting on 2 fronts, shuttling reserves back and forth wherever the pressure was greatest. Hold the inner wall, rush to the outer wall, back to the inner wall. It was exhausting, desperate chaos. Then the Gauls changed tactics. A massive night assault. Under cover of darkness, they advanced with ladders, hooks, and siege towers. Thousands of warriors hitting multiple points on the outer wall at once, while Vercingetorix attacked from inside. It was the closest the Romans came to breaking. Sections of the wall were overrun. Gallic warriors poured through breaches. Romans fought hand-to-hand in the gaps, trying to plug holes in their lines with their bodies. Caesar himself rode from crisis point to crisis point, leading reinforcements, shouting orders, his red general's cloak making him an obvious target. By dawn, the Romans had held, but just barely.
The Gallic commanders had spotted something during the night attack, a weak point in the northern section of the outer wall where the terrain made construction difficult. The fortifications there weren't as strong. That's where they'd concentrate everything. The final assault came with 60,000 warriors hitting that northern weak point. It was the largest single attack of the siege. At the same time, Vercingetorix led his entire force out of Alesia in a desperate breakout attempt. The northern wall started to crumble. Gallic cavalry, including Germanic horsemen who were absolute beasts, broke through the first line of defenses. The Romans were being pushed back, the fortifications collapsing under the sheer weight of numbers. This was the moment, the decisive moment of the entire battle. If the northern wall fell completely, the relief army would flood through, link up with Vercingetorix, and the Romans would be annihilated. Caesar made his move. He took his last reserve, 13,000 cavalry, and personally led them in a flanking maneuver around the outside of his own fortifications. The Gauls were so focused on breaking through the wall, they never saw it coming. Caesar's cavalry smashed into their rear like a hammer. The psychological impact was devastating. Suddenly, they were being attacked from behind, and that red cloak was visible to everyone. Caesar himself was in the fight. From the walls of Alesia, Vercingetorix watched his relief army, his last hope, scatter across the countryside with Roman cavalry cutting them down. The coordinated attack had failed. The relief force was destroyed. The Romans didn't just win, they annihilated the relief army. Ancient sources claim tens of thousands were killed in the pursuit. The largest army Gaul had ever assembled was shattered in a single afternoon. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix knew it was over. The siege of Alesia had lasted about 6 weeks. Inside the fortress, they were starving. They'd already expelled the civilians, women, children, elderly, hoping Caesar would let them through. He didn't. They starved to death in the no-man's land between the walls. Vercingetorix called a council. He told his remaining chieftains he'd started this war and he'd end it. If his surrender could save what was left of his people, so be it. The next day, the gates of Alesia opened. Vercingetorix rode out alone, wearing his finest armor and carrying his weapons. He rode slowly down the hill toward the Roman camp, past the corpse-filled trenches, through the shattered fortifications. He found Caesar seated on a platform. Without a word, Vercingetorix dismounted, laid his sword and shield at Caesar's feet, and knelt. Some accounts say he circled Caesar's chair 3 times in a gesture of submission before kneeling. Caesar had him dragged away in chains. Vercingetorix would spend the next 6 years in a Roman prison, then be paraded through the streets of Rome in Caesar's triumph before being ritually strangled in the Tullium, Rome's execution chamber. But the real story was bigger than one man. Alesia broke Gallic resistance permanently. There would be small rebellions over the years, but organized resistance to Rome? Done. Finished. Gaul would remain part of the Roman Empire for the next 500 years. The cost? Estimates suggest that during Caesar's entire Gallic campaign, around 1 million Gauls were killed and another million enslaved. Entire tribes were wiped out or scattered. But it also created what would eventually become France. Roman roads, Roman cities, Roman law, Latin language, all of it took root in Gaul because of what happened at Alesia. And for Caesar, Alesia gave him everything he needed: wealth from plunder and slaves, political prestige from conquering Gaul, and most importantly, a battle-hardened army fanatically loyal to him personally, not to Rome. 4 years after Alesia, Caesar would use that army to cross the Rubicon River and march on Rome itself, starting a civil war that would end the Roman Republic and make Caesar dictator. None of that would have been possible without the victory at Alesia. The Siege of Alesia changed the course of Western history, and it all came down to one insane decision.
Today, you can visit the site of Alesia in Burgundy, France. There's a museum, reconstructed fortifications, and a massive statue of Vercingetorix looking out over the battlefield. Archaeologists have confirmed the layout of Caesar's siege works, the double walls, the trenches, the traps. It all happened exactly as described. And military academies around the world still study this battle, not just because Caesar won, but because of how he won. Think about the audacity of it. No general before Caesar had ever built fortifications facing both directions. No army had ever willingly trapped itself between two enemy forces. The conventional wisdom said it was suicide. But Caesar looked at a situation where every option was bad and found a solution nobody else could see. He turned his greatest weakness, being surrounded, into his greatest strength. He made the enemy fight on his terms, on ground he'd prepared, through defenses designed to multiply his soldiers' effectiveness. His engineering won the battle before the fighting even started. Those fortifications forced the Gauls to attack through kill zones. Every advantage they had in numbers was neutralized by terrain Caesar had created. And the stakes? If Caesar loses at Alesia, Gaul probably stays free. Rome's expansion halts. Caesar's political career ends. Maybe his life too. No civil war. No Roman Empire. European history takes a completely different path. But he didn't lose. And because 60,000 Romans held those walls against overwhelming odds, because Caesar had the nerve to trap himself and the genius to make it work, Western civilization looks the way it does today. The Siege of Alesia wasn't just a military victory. It was a demonstration that sometimes the craziest plan, the one everyone says is impossible, is actually the only plan that works. Julius Caesar buried himself alive with his army. He trapped himself between two massive enemy forces with no retreat and no escape. His men thought he'd lost his mind. And when the dust settled, he'd buried his enemies instead.